Marcus walked into the bank, his heart heavy with apprehension. It wasn't his first time here, but today felt different. He needed to open a new account and transfer a substantial amount of money for a business deal he had been working on for months. But as soon as he stepped into the lobby, he felt the stares, cold, judging, and dismissive. The bank was sleek and modern, with polished floors and a faint scent of expensive coffee lingering in the air. The tellers behind the counter were busy, but one of them, a young woman with a tight bun and a practiced smile, noticed Marcus and gave a barely perceptible nod to a security guard standing near the entrance. The guard, a tall man with a stern expression, walked over to Marcus. "Can I help you, sir?" The guard's tone was firm, almost accusatory. Marcus forced a smile, hoping to diffuse the tension he felt growing around him. "Yes, I'm here to open a new account and make a transfer." The guard glanced at Marcus's casual but neat attire and then at the briefcase he was holding. "Do you have an appointment?" he asked, his eyes narrowing. "I wasn't aware I needed one," Marcus replied, maintaining his composure. The guard gestured towards the line of people waiting. "You can wait over there," he said, his tone dismissive. Marcus nodded and took his place in line, feeling the weight of every glance that landed on him. As he waited, he noticed that others who had come in after him were being served before him. He saw the tellers exchange looks and whispers, and he knew what was happening. He had faced this kind of subtle, insidious racism before, but it never got easier. After what felt like an eternity, Marcus finally reached the counter. The teller, the same young woman who had called the guard, barely looked at him as she asked for his identification. He handed it over, and she scrutinized it for longer than necessary, her eyes flicking back and forth between his face and the ID. "I'm sorry, but we can't process your request today," she said flatly, sliding the ID back across the counter. Marcus felt a surge of frustration and anger. "Why not?" he asked, trying to keep his voice steady. "Your documents need further verification," she replied, not meeting his eyes. "You'll need to come back with additional proof of identification and your financial statements." Marcus knew this was just an excuse, a way to brush him off without causing a scene. He took a deep breath, ready to argue, when a voice from behind him spoke up. "Is there a problem here?" Marcus turned to see a man in a sharp suit approaching. He had an air of authority, and the teller immediately straightened up. "No, Mr. Jacobs," the teller stammered. "I was just explaining to this gentleman that he needs to bring in more documents?" Mr. Jacobs finished her sentence, his tone calm but carrying an undercurrent of reprimand. "Yes, sir," the teller replied, clearly flustered. Mr. Jacobs turned to Marcus and extended his hand. "I'm the branch manager, Charles Jacobs. I apologize for the inconvenience, sir. Please, come with me to my office." Marcus hesitated for a moment, unsure of what to expect, but then he shook Mr. Jacobs' hand and followed him. The manager's office was spacious, with large windows that overlooked the busy street outside. Mr. Jacobs gestured for Marcus to sit down and then closed the door, shutting out the noise of the bank. "I want to apologize for the way you've been treated today," Mr. Jacobs began, his expression sincere. "I assure you this is not how we conduct business." Marcus raised an eyebrow, skeptical. It sure felt like it. Mr. Jacobs nodded, acknowledging the truth in Marcus's words. "You're right, and I take full responsibility for that. But I want to make things right." He reached into a drawer and pulled out a business card, sliding it across the desk to Marcus. "This is my direct line. If you ever encounter any issues, you call me directly. No more waiting, no more excuses." Marcus looked at the card, then back at Mr. Jacobs. "Why are you doing this?" Mr. Jacobs leaned back in his chair, his gaze steady. "Because I know how it feels to be judged unfairly. I may not share your experiences, but I recognize the injustice when I see it." For the first time since entering the bank, Marcus felt a glimmer of hope. He took the card and nodded. "Thank you." Mr. Jacobs smiled, standing up and extending his hand once more. "Let's get your account set up, and I'll personally oversee the transfer." As Marcus walked out of the bank that day, he couldn't shake the feeling of being torn between the harsh reality of discrimination and the unexpected kindness from someone he least expected. But he knew that the fight for equality wasn't just about one moment. It was about every decision, every action, and every person willing to stand up and do what's right. Marcus left Mr. Jacobs' office with a mixture of relief and lingering unease. Though the manager had stepped in and tried to make amends, the sting of discrimination still throbbed in his chest. As he walked back through the bank lobby, he noticed the same teller and security guard exchanging glances. He overheard a whispered comment, something about special treatment, and his jaw tightened. The next few weeks passed without incident. Marcus focused on his business, pushing the bank experience to the back of his mind. But the memory resurfaced when he received a call from Mr. Jacobs. "Mr. Matthews," Mr. Jacobs began, his tone professional but warm, "I'd like to invite you to a special event we're hosting at the bank next week. It's a community outreach program, and I think it would be a great opportunity for us to show our commitment to diversity and inclusion." Marcus hesitated. He wasn't eager to return to the bank, but something in Mr. Jacobs's voice made him agree. "All right, I'll be there." The day of the event, Marcus arrived at the bank to find it transformed. The sterile corporate atmosphere had been replaced with vibrant decorations and a palpable sense of excitement. There were representatives from local organizations, speakers on various social issues, and even a band playing in the background. Mr. Jacobs greeted Marcus at the door, shaking his hand warmly. "I'm glad you could make it," he said. "We have a special presentation later, and I'd love for you to be a part of it." Marcus nodded, trying to match the manager's enthusiasm, but he couldn't shake the feeling that this was all for show, a performance to gloss over the real issues. Marcus mingled with the crowd at the event, listening to speeches and meeting other attendees. The bank staff kept their distance, smiling but interacting briefly. The bank wanted to seem inclusive, but its attitudes hadn't changed. Mr. Jacobs took the stage for his presentation. He spoke about the bank's commitment to fighting discrimination and fostering inclusion. He praised the diversity of the community and announced new initiatives to support minority-owned businesses. Marcus saw the same teller and security guard from his first visit standing at the edge of the crowd, whispering and snickering. It was the same old behavior in a new setting. Mr. Jacobs invited Marcus to join him on stage when he finished his speech. Marcus was unsure, but the manager's look made him go on. "Marcus Matthews is an entrepreneur we want to support," Mr. Jacobs said. "We can all learn from his success story. We're honored to have him here today." The applause was loud, but Marcus felt exposed and vulnerable. He looked out at the crowd. Some were supportive, some were skeptical, and some were hostile. He took a deep breath and spoke from the heart. "I'm grateful for the support, but I can't pretend everything is perfect. I've faced discrimination in this bank and many other places. Events like this won't help if the attitudes don't change." The crowd fell silent, the weight of Marcus's words heavy on them. He kept speaking, his voice steady and strong. "Real change starts from within. It's about challenging our biases, standing up against injustice, and treating everyone with respect." Marcus looked at Mr. Jacobs, who nodded and looked serious. "We have to live by our diversity values. Everyone should be treated with dignity and respect when they walk into this bank or any other business." There was a long pause before the applause began again, this time slower. Marcus left the stage, feeling both lighter and heavier. He spoke his truth, but knew there was still a long way to go. Mr. Jacobs caught up with him as he walked to the exit. "That was powerful, Marcus," he said. "Thank you for being honest." Marcus nodded, but he still felt tense. "Honesty is the way through this," he replied. Mr. Jacobs gave Marcus a folded piece of paper. "This is personal," he said. "A gesture to show I'm committed to this fight." Marcus found a letter and a check in the paper. The letter was an apology for discrimination under Mr. Jacobs's watch. The check was a donation to a local racial equality and justice organization. Marcus looked at Mr. Jacobs, looking for signs of insincerity. He saw a man trying to make a difference in a flawed system. It was a start. As Marcus left the bank, he knew the fight against racism wasn't over, but he knew he had allies, even in unexpected places. That was a small victory. Marcus left the bank with the letter and check. Mr. Jacobs's gesture was meaningful. but it didn't make what he did better. As he stepped out into the sun, Marcus knew that change wouldn't come from one event or apology. It was a long, difficult journey that required courage. He vowed to keep fighting for everyone who had been made to feel less than because of their skin color. The battle wasn't over, but he was determined to keep going.